Okay, this is for Brian, who likes Dr. Pepper. You just got invited to Academy, Maxfield, or McAfee, something. Right, you're about 2 years or a year and a half out of a ACL injury. So, what are some things that I wish I knew going forward? I think the moment that my career started to decline was the night. It was the night after I scored a 40-yard banger. When I say upper 90 uprights from 40 yards away against our rival Sparta, we won 2-1, and in the second half, it might have been longer than 40 yards. It was in the newspaper. And I remember I literally stood in the shower and I said to myself, I was like, basically, my mindset was, you're the cat's pajamas, right? Like, you don't need to get any better because you got it all figured out. And then from there, it was just like this, it took me a while to get back on track. And even when I thought I was back on track, I really wasn't. So, what does this mean? I think you have to be a perpetual learner. You got to be curious of the players around you, good and bad. You have to be curious. You gotta, right? Like I'm 10 years out from being a D1 college soccer player. Yet I'm 10 times better than I was when I was 22. Right? I'm 32 now, and I attribute it to being a joker. And what I mean by being a joker is that they say, right, like in a deck of cards, the joker is king because the joker is willing to look foolish, right? Because you're never gonna be great at something unless you look silly or foolish in the beginning. This means starting learning a new trick, learning a new language, learning a new job. Right? They say the master has failed more times than the beginner has tried. So it's those who are willing to look foolish and to put their ego aside to advance not only themselves, but their community, right? Because the better that you get, the better that you can help elevate everyone's ideas around you, right? Because you're a little network. You have yourself, and you have your friends and your family, and then you're a member in a school, in a work community, school community, and that reflects on where you live, and then you have digital communities, right? So what you do is really, really important, right? Because each person they're another network, right? This is all Jordan Peterson. So when you're honest with yourself, when you're truthful about, the things that you're both good and bad at, and then start to elevate those things, you make the world a better place. So just one thing to be clear, I'm not giving advice. This is not advice, right? Because just because I had successes and failures in some aspects of my life, it doesn't mean that just because what I've done has worked or not worked doesn't mean that if you ran it back the same way, it would turn out the same or different, right? So you have to take everything that I say, do, right, that I'm, well, mostly, right, you gotta watch what people do and what they say, but mostly what they do, because that's the most telling, right? Because I could tell you, well, Brian, it's good to get 1,000 juggles a day. But if you don't see me getting 1,000 juggles a day, right, it's a harder sell, right? So you gotta watch what people do, not what they say. And my little brother tells me, there's a story of his golf coach. The first time he met his swing coach, and this guy looks like someone who you wouldn't expect to know how to play golf. Yet, in just 2 seconds, he could diagnose what was wrong with my little brother's swing, and he helped him take his golf game to the next level. So it's not that people It's not that you shouldn't listen to what people say. It's that when people's words and actions aren't congruent, then you should focus on what they do, right? Right. So that means that just because I'm giving good advice, you gotta test it. You gotta test it just like what anyone says. You gotta think about it. Is this true? Is this not true? Right? And you gotta see for yourself, because if you start believing blindly what people say or do or believe in, things could get a little hairy. So where does this leave us? Something that really changed the paradigm, right? To change the way I thought about my professional development and being professional. What does that mean? You might want to search Simon Sinek. Oh Jesus, what's it called? Search Simon Sinek CEO interviews. I forget the guy's name. There's a long series of interviews with different CEOs, and listen to the one about Simon Sinek, because he talks about people whose one-term singular goal is to play on Broadway or to be a professional athlete. And he said that a lot of times what happens is that the day they're signed, right, the day that someone gets signed to be a pro athlete, or it's the day that someone gets the offer to be on Broadway, they become very, very unhappy. And the reason is because all the relationships in their life are one-sided, because their only thing that they're aiming at is to be that one thing. So that means all the relationships they've cultivated in their life revolve around this singular goal, and that starts to make them, right, that you become almost a one-dimensional person. But he said the cure is to just shift your mindset, because he told a story of this professional football player, we're talking American football, who realized that if he could turn professional, that he could influence more people in his community and help underprivileged youth. He could help clean up the streets of the place where he lived in, right? Because he had, it seemed that when he was growing up, he had two options. It was either gang violence or jail, right? So, and that's not unreasonable, because in some communities, those are the only, it's sometimes it seems like those are the only ways to advance. So this isn't an unreasonable conclusion, but what he realizes that becoming a professional was just a platform for growing himself and his community. So there was no, so what started to happen was that there was no difference in his behavior from before he was a professional to when he was a professional to after he retired as a professional, because he was perpetually making his own life better, and he was making his life better for his family and the people in his community. So, right, when I suggested that you make your own bed, what I'm alluding to is the fact that being a professional is how you speak to yourself, and how you speak to yourself will be reflected on the other relationships in the rest of your life, and every interaction with everyone